What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. I know a lot of you guys, especially my subscribers, have followed me on my channel for a very specific reason for the videos that I make, but I've decided to abandon all of that. My latest passion project, which is art/interior design. I know this may come as a shock to you guys, but deep down I've always been an artist, and luckily, art is one of those things that doesn't really matter what anybody's opinion is. You can kind of just do whatever you want. And so I want to introduce you guys to my latest project, which is Dollar Tree flowers glued to canvas. As you can see here, I have this beautiful Dollar Tree flower that I glued to a canvas. So that's what I'm going to be doing now on this channel. I'm going to be selling these to you guys. I'm sure all of you will totally understand, because even though you subscribe to my channel for an entirely different reason, you're already here. So I might as well just try to sell you this incredibly talented art, right? That makes sense, doesn't it? Well, according to Gypsy Rose Blanchard, it does. She decided to reactivate her profiles, especially the one on TikTok with over 9 million followers, to advertise her latest hobby / business, which is blown beauty art. And this is something that Christy has done, and I guess Gypsy just decided to take it over and then try to essentially sell it to her 9 million followers without telling them whatsoever, even though that is not the reason that they followed her in the first place. Most of them decided to follow her as a way to keep up with what she's doing, to get a look at her life following her release from prison or whatever. But as Gypsy has said, she does not care about any of her supporters or any of her followers. So now she's just gonna rip them off by charging $100 that she hasn't ever really studied or tried to practice a lot on, perfect, put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this and really hone in on any sort of talent. Nope, she's just gonna go off of a 2-minute tutorial from Christy and, sell it for over $100 because that's what people do, right? No, that's what grifters do. That is what scammers do. And I'm sure a lot of people were thinking, well, hey, at least she's got something to do. And I know a lot of us probably don't really care. Yeah, great, Gypsy's got a hobby. But the problem is she's trying to rip off a bunch of people with that hobby for something that is not worth it, and going off of the infamy of her crime. She told People magazine that she wants to get away from her past. Leave that all behind and focus on her new passion, art. And you'd think like, hey, well, at least she's not harassing Ryan, but she's still doing that too. And not only Ryan Anderson, but his brother now. If you didn't see Gypsy's comment on Conspiracy's video from her personal profile, The Butterfly Kissed Soul, she was essentially running her mouth about Ryan Anderson and his brother, and both of them being prescribed a MAP medication, saying that they abuse those medications, running them down, running her mouth, which again, really bizarre behavior for somebody that claims to be an addict. So today's video, we're going to get into Gypsy Rose emails that were released by Into the Weeds. And the ones that I'm going to be looking at today all involve Gypsy's mother, any mention of Dee Dee. So Gypsy wants to leave all of those things in the past, but we're going to be talking about Gypsy's past today. And she wants to, kind of disregard all of that and the fact that she orchestrated the murder of her mother. That's what we're going to be doing today, looking at everything that Gypsy said about her mother in those emails, things about her childhood or things that we didn't know. So before we get into that, make sure you like and subscribe and make sure your notifications are turned on. But let's go ahead and get into what Gypsy Rose Blanchard's prison emails have to say about her past that she so desperately wants to get away from. So starting out strong in Gypsy's emails when she is writing about the Lifetime movie Love You to Death, which was inspired by her life story. I've personally never watched it, but I know a few other people have. And I think it's loosely based on Gypsy Rose Blanchard's life and the story. There's been a couple of movies. I think there was one out with Sarah Paulson that was also kind of inspired by it. Not directly, but, following that Munchausen by proxy thing that they had going on. But she starts talking and she says, "Babe, I just saw the trailer for Love You to Death on Lifetime. Whoa, the house looks spot on and so does Mom. Like, it looks not too far off base. We'll watch it just out of curiosity to see how they spin the story. I can tell you one thing that is different from real life and the little snip clip of the movie. I never told my mother she was using me because simply I wasn't aware at the time. It wasn't until I got to speak with Mike when I learned how deep the sham was. Mom and I did get into arguments, but I never called her on crap because number one, I didn't know how bad it really was. And number two, I didn't want to get the crap knocked out of me by saying what needed to be said to her. Anyway, it's kind of crazy seeing my story, my past, my life in a Lifetime movie. Like I said, I'll watch it, but if it gets to be too much for me, blah, 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 blah." Which, that email, she's trying to play it off as, she was innocent and she was such a good girl. We've seen that narrative from her. Like, she's always said, "I was a very good child." We've even seen that in some of her, YouTube videos. "I was a good child. I always listened. I always did what I was told." But if you listen to some of the other things that Gypsy has said, I don't know how she can go from saying that she never stood up to her mom or never got into it with her mom when she literally shot her with a BB gun multiple times, threatened her with a dagger according to her book, chased her down the hallway and cornered her. And that's just one instance, not including whenever she ran away with Dan and she was calling her mom out on her crap, apparently. That's what Gypsy said, but in these emails, she's pretending like, "Oh, I never stood up to my mom ever." And to say, "Oh, I wasn't aware of how deep this really was," that again is the whole confusion of everything. Gypsy has always claimed she didn't know she was being abused, but then she'll go and say, "Yeah, I was being abused. It was, I had to kill her, die myself. It was kill or be killed." But how do you go from kill or be killed to, "Yeah, I didn't really know I was being abused"? Narrative that doesn't work. The excuse for killing your mother doesn't work if you didn't know you were being abused. What was your reason? It can't be all of those things at the same time. And throughout the emails, we can see Gypsy again using this situation with her mom to kind of manipulate people, I feel like. So, for example, she had, I want to say it was Ken, pray with her for her mother. She was the cause for Dee Dee's death. So at one point, Gypsy also talks about not wanting to live in Louisiana because there are too many memories of her mother. And she says, "Dear love, today I realized something. As frustrated and angry as I can be with you, at the same time I want nothing more than to hold you close. I lost you for 3 days and it was 3 days too many. Yes, I stood my ground, but I was shaking every time you answered the phone. I never want to experience what I felt. I know I caused it. There are things said that I didn't mean and words I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I am extremely sensitive to the things you say, and I'll always take you at your word. I can understand why you felt you could do the same, but my emotions changed and my view of something in any given moment. Meaning, if you say something to me or do something, I feel an emotion, then I react while in that emotion. I don't give myself time to process things, I just react. But I promise that is something I will work on, processing things without making an unclear reaction." Blah, blah, blah. It's a long one. And then it goes on to say, "Think about having this little apartment in Minnesota. Why Minnesota? Well, it's up north, far from Louisiana or Missouri. The pine trees are beautiful and the landscape is peaceful. I've never been, only driving through on my ride back from Wisconsin. Nick was right when he said he loved it in Wisconsin. It too is peaceful, and moreover, don't think it's the land more that it's no one knew me. It was a fresh start. It was short-lived, but it was nice. I want to feel that same peace when I leave prison. I want to come home and be able to have that moment that my mind has, that deep inner contentment. And I'm just not sure I'll have that peace in Louisiana, a place crowded with memories of my mother, where she grew up, where I spent my childhood in and out of hospitals. Why would I want to go back to the beginning? I would visit, take a trip down memory lane, but I don't want to live in the past. And at the same time, I love my father and he deserves time with me, even if it's while he is home from work for a month. The same example can be made with us getting married in here and out there. I want to clear my mind of everyone's opinions, good or bad, and live in the moment and let myself feel happy and feel loved. I have a wonderful man who is my match in every way, and this is about our commitment and our unity. Again, talking about Rod, and she says, and just as that's my want, but my father has been robbed of every could have been prom, school dance, and other father-daughter social occasions with me. He should be included in future occasions. In my opinion, the second ceremony I think would be the best to include him in. However, I already sent the invites to Bling and Dad as well as your mother. Honestly, I don't see your mom coming to visit again. She has stated she wants to attend. Dad complained it was during hunting season, but will want to come, although his work schedule doesn't always pan out. So, and that's something, again, like pointing out that Rod doesn't really put in a whole lot of effort with Gypsy. His daughter is getting married, and he's like, well, dang, it's hunting season. And I get it. Like, I come from a family of hunters, and, even on holidays, Thanksgiving and stuff, they're hunting. But I feel like there are some occasions in life that you would try to make it for. And he's like, well, dang, like, it's hunting season. And I can kind of get it, too, because she's also in prison. So he's probably thinking, like, it's not a good idea anyway to get married in prison. So it doesn't really count as a real wedding or something like that in his mind. But I just find it funny how he was talking about how he wants to build this relationship. And he tried so hard all of Gypsy's life. And Dee Dee kept him from it. And he's like, but it's hunting season. But that's what Rod meant when he told Gypsy that no one will ever love her as much as Dee Dee loved her. No one's going to care about her and take care of her as much as Dee Dee did. He meant that because Dee Dee devoted her entire life to that girl. In one email, when Gypsy's talking about Dan and the whole incident when she ran away to be with Dan, she starts giving some other information that I found a little bit interesting. And I don't know who she was writing it to, but it says, hi, this is just a private message to you and you only. Let me know that I reached out to you. Frankly, I'm shocked he has been quiet and laid low. And this time, if you have any questions in our past interaction with each other, I can answer a few questions for you. I can answer some basic and frequently asked questions that people ask me when they watch one of the TV specials. Most common, did we have sex? No. Did he know in full detail of my life living with my mother? Not in full detail, but he knew some, mostly speculation about my real age. Was he a romantic interest? To me, kinda, only in the way that I did have a huge crush on him way back when, even with the 16 or so age gap. Although I think it was only one-sided, we were only ever flirty friends. Another one that people ask is, why didn't he call the cops on my mother or try to stand up to her when my mother found me with him and proceeded to bring me back home? At the time, I was really 19 years old, but my mother had claimed that I was only 15 years old. He feared being arrested for being in the company of an old minor, even though I was really of legal age. If you have any more questions, please feel free to email me back. And there were a couple of emails that Gypsy would again touch on her mother, preventing her from having any sort of social life, when she's giving a little bit of like a list of facts about her, like favorite animal, wolves and husky dogs or whatever. And she says she's 3 things about her. She's quirky, compassionate, strong-willed. Something she takes for granted was her new ability to make friends. For so long, my mother prevented me from having a social life, and now that I can, I'm very introverted. The thing I want most, to love and be loved equally. And I think it's funny how Gypsy says that in one email that her actions were set into motion by her mother, as if she never had a choice because of the way that things went with her mother, just like predestined to have this crime happen. And it kind of like, I feel like it's almost taking some of the blame off of her and shifting it to her mother, as if it's her mother's fault that she's dead. So she says, I wanted to add to my last message that I understand if you are not able to explain everything to me in detail. However, I am grateful for this. In the last year, ever since the show aired, I have had thousands of supporters sign my petition for early release, as well as contact me personally, all with 100% positive feedback. I still believe that more awareness needs to be shared about Munchausen by proxy. I thought maybe you might be curious to know how I am doing, besides all of the rest I shared with you earlier. and shared who is Gypsy Blanchard today. The Gypsy Blanchard everyone knows from the act is almost a distant memory. I no longer have a squeaky voice. Yes, it is still feminine, but it is no longer childlike. I have been taking general education classes, and I've passed every subject except math. I have successfully completed 7+ institutional classes, and I teach one myself. A class called ICVC is devoted to teaching other inmates how to take accountability for their crimes and aid them in ways to give back to the community. I share my story as a cautionary tale. I own my part, and I don't sugarcoat or make excuses for what I've done. Yeah. But I also know how my actions were set in motion before I was ever born with my mother's choices. My father and my stepmother are very close in my life. My father still feels guilt to this day, but she's literally sitting there saying, like, not really anything that she actively chose to do, because all of her mother's choices and actions had like a predetermined outcome for Gypsy to plot this murder for multiple years. What? I thought it was interesting that in an email she sent at the time she was talking to Ryan, she did not want him on social media and accidentally come across any of the crime scene photos. So she says, Kettle Muffin, I know that things got kind of serious in our conversation with regards to social media. I told you one of my biggest fears in telling you that I have a lot of guilt on myself, and I know that seeing those horrible pictures will never make it any better, but it can make it worse. Being someone new all my life, seeing my mother like that would drive me insane with guilt. Next to losing you and my father, that is my biggest fear. Hugs you tight. I think that's what she meant. Seeing somebody that I knew, seeing my mother like that would drive me insane with guilt. So it's not like she just doesn't want anybody to see it because she just feels so guilty. She's just more concerned about what people will think about her when they see those images. And yeah, rightfully so. It was a very brutal crime. And during the time whenever Gypsy was kind of getting into it with her friend Rachel Garlick, which we've heard of multiple times, she was the one who was originally running a lot of Gypsy's social media platforms, and I guess she was kind of accepting donations or whatever to Gypsy and sending her the money or whatever. And then Gypsy kind of weaponizes her mother's death against Rachel Garlick because she was upset with how that was reflecting in her relationship, because her partner at the time said it kind of looks bad, but she weaponized her mother's death against Rachel Garlick. And it's not because she actually cared about what any of her family members would actually think, because I mean, clearly Gypsy benefits off her mother's death to this day, right? But this email, it says, seeing one perspective and then the other's parole board sees a different perspective. She's my issue. Issue is we had a lot of fun with our Q&A videos at first. Things took a turn when someone was threatening to get me in trouble for the videos. I asked her to take down everything that regarded me, and she didn't. I had someone look up today at her page, and all of those past videos about me are still up. The merchandise was a bad idea altogether. It looks like I'm proud of my crime. Her selling stuff reflects negative on me. How do you think my mother's side of the family feels about her murderer's friend selling t-shirts and merchandise? People don't think about that. Blank didn't think about that, and neither did I at first. And every day that passes, that her page revolves around me, more and more upset. I see the parole board in 10 months. My focus needs to be on my freedom. I'm sure it wasn't meant with ill intent. I know it wasn't, but for the love of God, I want her to wipe her page clean of me. It has caused too many problems for me already. Again, I'm not accusing her of keeping money. I'm saying she isn't looking at it from the perspective of someone, say, like my aunt or uncle or my grandpa. The grandpa that abused her? Why would she care what he thinks? My crime hurt people, and I'm trying to make amends, not create more pain for them. Again, on the same subject, she says, I think the real deep reason why I don't want to get any money from donations or anything like that is because I don't want to be put into the same category as my mother, or people to think that that is what my agenda is for sharing my story. We all know my mother had a long history of fraud and scamming. I just don't want to rely on people donating to me my whole life when I want to be independent. I want to get a job someday and work for what I buy and contribute to society. So anything to do with relying on others' financial assistance, I'm like, nope. That's kind of interesting, is it? You know, given that she literally came out and became an influencer, and now she's just selling random elementary grade skill level art from the public. Weird how that stuff happens, you know? It's almost like she doesn't mean anything that she really says. So speaking of Gypsy not caring about her mother's family, she brings it up and then talks about going on to Dr. Phil again, potentially. She says, okay, now that I have a little bit more time to write, I have been so busy the last week and this week. I am now going to go to school full time again, so I've been adjusting to my schedule, to the new hours. Things are slowly opening back up here. I have not thought about writing to my mother's brothers and sisters for the simple fact I don't want to cause any more pain. I always thought a letter might upset them even more, so I let it be. Honestly, I'm not going to go reach out to them. If they want to reach out to me, then they can do that at any time. If they want to disown me and cast me from the family, then I understand. I'm not even upset with them if they would, or maybe they already have. But yes, I'll reach back out to Dr. Phil, but not for another interview. That has all been said and done, but I'd rather request what kind of options I have. So then in one of the emails, Gypsy is talking about how apparently in this one, she says that Dee Dee wanted Gypsy to be a nun. And if you recall back in Gypsy's book, she does touch on this a little bit, but she doesn't make it sound out like she does in this email, like her mom was trying to force her to be a nun almost. But instead in the book, she kind of phrases it as she had this desire to be a nun as a child, and she would set up all her little stuffed animals and do like the little communion or whatever, baptism. And it was like her desire and her dream to be a nun, probably because she said she was going to vacation Bible school at the time, and you know how little kids are. But in this email, instead, she's saying that her mom wanted to have her committed to like a nunnery. And it says, you are very, okay, I'm not going to read that. Purpose of tickling, blah, blah, blah. You went to Catholic school? Well, that explains everything. In reference to your lack of an interest in religion, my mother wanted me to be committed to a nunnery. She felt my place was among the nuns. I'm certainly not nun material. So weird. But it's just, again, that's just how she does. I don't think she even keeps up with her stories and what she says. And even if it's something that she wanted to do, she'll blame it on her mother if it fits in the moment. So at one point, Gypsy gets an email from Melissa or somebody working with them asking about, was she being seen by a doctor on a regular basis after like 2007? Because again, that is something that a lot of us have talked about as far as the medical records go. There's a huge gap from like after 2007-ish. There's like nothing except for like a visit here and there. Like the chromosome test was randomly like in 2011 or something, but it was nothing like back-to-back-to-back doctor visits. And so they're questioning Gypsy on that, and then she's pretty much saying like, no, that's not possible. I was definitely going to the doctor, but she doesn't list anything pretty much after that date. So she says the time frame between late 2005 and 2007, I was being seen at St. John Mercy's Hospital in Springfield, Missouri. Dr. Robert Steele was my pediatric doctor, and then sometime in 2008, my mother had chosen doctors from Kansas City Children's Mercy Hospital. There is no way that I was not seen on a constant basis. In 2007, I believe, is when I had the surgery on my neck to remove my salivary glands. But it's like she can't even sit there and say what again, somebody that claimed to have over 100 surgeries, what happened after 2007. She can't even list it. So that's probably why there's a huge gap in the medical records, and it's not because they were lost or anything. It's because she literally was not going very often, which ruins the whole Munchausen by proxy narrative, because it's not something that just like will stop and start and stop and start and stop and start. Also brings up the fact that she's not proud to be an American, which it was kind of like random to say, but also like she probably should be glad that she's an American, because I feel like, you know, America's justice system is, her being an American is the only reason that she got out in 10 years for the charge that she got. Probably any other country, she would have been sent away to life, honestly. But she's talking to somebody, I believe, from the UK at this point. She says, LOL, Well, let me just say, not all Americans are rude, but the majority are. So those that are, I'm sorry. Personally, I'm not proud to live here. I was born and raised here, but I've always been drawn to the UK or Ireland. I always felt I was born in the wrong place. Wow, you have traveled a lot. I have yet to see even the best parts of America. With the way my mother kept me from living a life, there are many, many things I haven't experienced. I appreciate that very much, you keeping our communications private, blah, blah, blah. But like, again, Gypsy being an American and getting the opportunity to get a slap on the wrist for the horrific crime that she committed, she should probably be thanking the government for screwing up that case and not letting her rot in prison for the rest of her life. And then to sit there and say, like, my mother kept such a tight leash on me, I didn't get to experience very much. She probably went more places than half of the population in America. She went tons of places, tons of events, all donated to Gypsy from their little fraudulent scams that they had going. She had tons of experiences, more than probably anybody at her age at the time. I mean, honestly, most people don't get to experience like one of those events that she got. And she got them like every other year, just about. And in one email, when Gypsy is, I think, talking to Melissa around the time when they're doing all the documentaries and books or whatever, Gypsy, I guess, tries to make it out that her mother bought the Nissan Cube, which was purchased like a few months before Dee Dee was murdered, as a way to, like, I don't know, punish Gypsy or like, control her even more, and not solely for the fact that that was probably an affordable vehicle that was also somewhat of an SUV type. She says, I remembered something that might be important in some way. It may not seem that hugely important, but it's something I remember. A few months before the crime, my mother bought a new vehicle, a Nissan Cube. As you may know, Cubes are small cars with a little room, definitely not handicap accessible vehicles. One of my wheelchairs was a collapsible portable wheelchair with no big wheels for the person sitting in it to wheel themselves. I had to be solely pushed by my mother in this particular chair. Therefore, my motorized chair was no longer able to be used anywhere other than the house because the vehicle was too small. As if her mother solely purchased that vehicle so she would have to push Gypsy in the wheelchair. That's what she's like essentially setting that up to be. Saying, oh, it may be significant or not, but she knows what she's doing. She's throwing this out and setting up this whole little narrative so she can be like, do with that what you want, but she's literally laying it all out for it to be like, oh, your mother did that to control you even more by not letting you use your fancy motorized wheelchair. It's ridiculous. So Gypsy says in one email, and again, I've said this, like, there are very few emails where Gypsy genuinely describes missing her mother. And I guess this could be counted as one of them. She says, I do miss my mother, and this moment in time is the hardest of the year. Holidays are hard being away from family, but there is no comparison to the regret and remorse and remembered memories of the past on this day. If I could go back 6 years ago and change the events that would unfold, I would give anything to undo the pain of my choices. My mother would be in jail, yes, but she would be alive. It's more like she doesn't really care about her mother being alive or really being in jail. She just doesn't want to be in jail. That's what she's really upset about, is that she's being punished for this crime. It's not because she misses her mother genuinely. It's not because she wanted her mother to get help for this mental illness. No, she's mad because she's in jail. She's upset because she had consequences for her own actions. That was her biggest regret, is getting caught. You can just tell she doesn't even care, even about Nick, when she's talking about Nick's mom ODing, and she's saying in the email that it's karma for Nick taking her mother. Where's her karma? She doesn't believe in karma for her because, again, she views herself as essentially innocent. Her hands are clean of the blood of her mother, when in reality, if anything, more of it's on her hands than Nick's. But that will be it for these emails on Gypsy's mother. I'm not sure if you guys were able to kind of see the pattern and the way that Gypsy would use her mother's death and like pivot to be able to use it in any situation that she was in for her own benefit. And it's never coming across as like a genuine feeling of like missing her mother. It's either she's upset because she's being punished in prison, or she's using it in a way to manipulate and get her way in a situation. And that's just how she is. She is very manipulative. And I feel like even, with the whole art thing and stuff that she's doing now, probably how she's going to be her entire life. But that was a lot in there. I'm probably going to have to make another part if I don't get all of it in one video. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. But I want to know what you guys thought about these emails so far with Gypsy talking about her mother. What did you think of them? Did you see any sort of pattern with what Gypsy said and did? Let me know down in the comments. As always, don't forget to like and hit the subscribe button and make sure those notifications are turned on so you can keep up to date with anything I've got coming out on my channel. I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.